I'm Jeff Stormer, and I host Party of One, an actual play podcast focused on two-player role-playing experiences. Every week, I sit down with a friend.
J.R. Goldberg.
Alvaro, a.k.a. Wormtooth, formerly MC Blackwolf.
Danny Costello.
My name's Rich Howard.
I'm Sharang Biswas.
We play a two-player role-playing game, we share some laughs.
An absolute blast to play.
It was a delight to run my game with someone who got so into it.
It was so easy to do.
Seeing the creativity just blossom right in front of my eyes.
Maybe a few tears.
I've never had a game make me question my previously staunch moral compass.
Jeff makes the greatest serial killer.
And we have a really good time.
It's a great way to take a chance on a new role-playing game.
Truly exemplifies what is wonderful about a game with just two people driving the narrative together.
You can find new episodes every Tuesday at partyofonepodcast.com.
Welcome to the Dune Prophecy Podcast. We're the Lorehounds, your guides to the secrets of the Sisterhood. I'm David.
And I'm Elysia, and this is our coverage of the HBO series Dune Prophecy, Episode 2, Two Wolves.
In this episode, we're going to start off with our hot takes and sort of general analysis. We'll take a little break, then we'll get into a scene-by-scene discussion of the episode, followed by listener feedback. And then after our outro, we will have a book spoiler discussion at the very, very end.
Yeah, we want to hear what you think about this show as well. What do you think of the first two episodes? What are you hoping for to come? Please send your thoughts in text or voicemail form to dune@thelorehounds.com. And Nancy will be monitoring that email, and we'll get back to you and incorporate your notes into our next feedback session.
We'd also invite you to join us on our community Discord server. We've got some great conversations happening there. We have channels set up for each episode. We also have a show guide, and that is an online resource that's going to be focused mostly on what we're seeing on the screen. We're being careful about future book spoilers. We'll talk about all that stuff in a minute. But the show guide is great because it works really well on your mobile device. So you can have it as a handy reference, or while you're watching, or if you want to go back to it, there'll be a link to the show guide in the show notes.
And of course, we also welcome all subscribers. We have the Lorehounds level and the Lore Masters level. You'll hear us thanking our Lore Masters at the end. And these people all get access to extra episodes, like our Second Breakfast episodes, where we just talk about life and what's going on. And also our 11sies episodes where we talked about extra movies. This past month, it was High Fidelity. For December, it's going to be more Netflix cheese.
Some heavy duty cheese. Yeah, you guys have got some fun titles lined up for that.
Oh yeah. I just binged the Christmas Prince.
Oh, God.
Not to be confused with the Princess Switch. I'm making sure not to watch them because I will confuse the plots.
Right. And how's it going over on Silo? Because you've got Silo coverage running full steam ahead right now.
Yeah. So that's busy times. Of course, they had to drop this week's episode early because of Thanksgiving. So yeah, we have our weekly public feed episodes. We've got mailbags going on in between, and then we've got extra spoiler casts on that separate subscriber feed, the book in the Silo Book Club. So
right, and be sure to check the show notes for the link tree, and that has links to the other feed where Elysia is covering Silo with Luke and Abby. Right?
Yes. Yeah, with Luke on the public feed and with Abby for the spoiler casts.
Nice. Good stuff. Just a couple of quick admin notes before we get into our hot takes. And just as a way to set expectation and sort of reminders, I've read the original books and seen all the on-screen stuff except for the sci-fi drama. You have read a bunch of the extended universe stuff, but not all of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say a bunch, like basically the Great Schools trilogy and the stuff around that.
Okay, got it. And then we've seen, and you've seen the sci-fi traumatization, but otherwise we've seen all the movies. And I think this is a good time to maybe introduce this idea to some folks who are not into so deeply into the Dune universe. And we're going to kind of use this as a little bit of nomenclature. If you hear us refer to XD, that is the extended universe stuff. That's sort of the term of art that people in the online communities use for all of the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson novelizations from the notes and other stuff that they've created. And then I think we can use OG for the original 6 books that Frank Herbert wrote. And then we kind of have the Villeneuve verse a little bit, which is kind of a hybridization of a little bit of both. And that's the 2 Dune movies that he made, and the third one obviously coming, and then this television show, because this is the same production house that's making that. And then just a reminder, we will have a deep dive book spoiler section at the very end. So if you're into that kind of stuff, wait until we finish the outro. Otherwise, Elysia, where are you with episode 2, where we are with the season overall? What's your hot takes and general lore analysis, if I can coin a phrase?
Well, I had to laugh when I saw the episode 2 with the title is called Two Wolves. It made me think of Dave Filoni, which if anyone who doesn't know is like basically like the head of Star Wars right now. And he loves wolves. So do I.
Okay.
But what did you think that the 2 wolves meant? I know they talked about it on the official podcast, but that was not the interpretation I had watching the episode.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to the official podcast yet. And I should mention just really quick as well, I'm traveling right now. We're visiting some relatives for the American Thanksgiving holiday. So my acoustics may be a little different for what people are used to. And just juggling family stuff and activities, and that, I haven't had a chance to read or listen to the official podcast, so I didn't hear what their interpretation is. For me, I was having a little trouble figuring out what 2 wolves was in reference to. I kind of feel like and this is just off my top of my head. I kind of feel like it's between Valia and Desmond.
That's what I interpreted it as, but I think they meant like the 2 wolves inside Desmond. And now I'm already forgetting what they said in the official podcast. So I'm like, nope, rejected. It's Valia and Desmond. That's my headcanon.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it seems like most people liked this episode better than the first one. But I have to admit, for me, it's the other way around. I didn't dislike this episode. I do think we're definitely gonna talk about that sex scene. I did find it like gratuitous.
We got some funny feedback about that too.
And I'm not even like, I'm not the prudish one. I'm usually the one who's like,
John's the prudish one.
Let characters have sex, But this was like, come on, HBO. HBO gonna HBO
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, this one, like, for instance, I did watch it twice, but I was less enthralled the second time. I was like, all right, come on. And the first one, like, the second time I watched it, I was just as into it. So yeah, take that for what it's worth. But it does develop the plot further. It's moving. We had set up the chessboard last time. Now we're, starting the opening moves. The opening moves are always boring in chess because it's just like bump a pawn forward 2 spaces, basically.
Right.
So I'm still waiting. I know that the back half is going to be where the story really picks up, just from what the cast has said about their favorite episodes in interviews. So I'm chilling. Right. I'm enjoying the show enough. Yeah.
Okay.
New opening was cool, right?
Yeah. Yep. And I figured, given the holiday, at least for my personal schedule and traveling and stuff, I didn't get a chance to dig into that, but I figure we could do a little analysis maybe on the next episode. It seemed pretty straightforward in terms of the visual images that they were giving us. It didn't feel at all like, say, True Detective this year, at the beginning of this year, where it was like, wow, they've embedded mysteries into this. It felt pretty straightforward in terms of things that we can easily interpret.
Yeah, it reminded me a little of Silo, but probably just because a DNA helix shows up. But indeed, Silo was a bit more like, let's dig into this and see what clues there are. This was, we have more of the eye motif that's everywhere. We've got the DNA, sandworms and spice. That's pretty straightforward. The pomegranate shows up. I do recommend watching it with audio description on.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Definitely do that. And it definitely feels like it's within the class of Westworld and Silo and all of these types of shows where we're giving us these computer graphics that add some context to the world building. And obviously some of the folks in production and that are involved in this production were involved in the Westworld production. So,
yeah. And what did you think of the episode overall?
Yeah, I thought it was also interesting that a lot of folks were enjoying the episode.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of enjoyed the first half, and then it started to fall apart for me a little bit. In the second half, it got a little soapy. And I wasn't sure what to think. But then when I took apart the Lego pieces that made up this episode, the lore is all pretty on point. I mean, we'll talk about the Desmond thing in a second. So it's not bad, but I just felt that there was a couple things that really I didn't enjoy. When the show veers off into the rebellion stuff, that's really where it started to lose.
I found that some of the most interesting part.
Okay, yeah, that was interesting because I didn't. There was some writing that I was like a little bit uncomfortable with. When Michaela is explaining to Valia what their purpose is, it's like, yeah, you should know that. You don't. That's exposition for audience. It's not exposition. You know, good exposition is when characters can explain stuff and it doesn't contradict their character motives, or it's not obvious that it's being told to us. So I felt that was a little bit off. And I have to say that the central mystery about Desmond Hart is making me nervous. And I've got one issue in which we'll talk about is like how his sort of wild swing from being prisoner to a vizier, you know, to being a trusted agent of the Emperor.
But I mean, that just says everything we need to know about Haviko. But
it's true.
I thought that was because going in, you know, I said based on reading what I knew of the character before, and in that novella, I thought that he would be this kind of character that he's proving to be, which is just maybe not an example of why being an emperor shouldn't necessarily be hereditary.
Right, exactly. I will say that Mark Strong's portrayal is great because he's trying to be this strong man, but he's weak and confused and being sort of buffeted by the political winds and not in control of everything. And Strong's performance of that nuance is really good. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. I'm just a little bit nervous with Hart because if they're going in a couple of different directions, they're really pushing some storyline that it's like, okay, let's see if you can pull that off. If they can, I'm here for it, but I'm just nervous and I'm, you know, going to hang in there. It also was a little jetpacky, like Valia getting from Wallet 9 to Seleucus Secundus really that quickly. It seemed a little quick for me, given the way that space travel works in this universe and everything, but okay, whatever. The show continues to be really visually beautiful. There's some amazing shots here. There's a great scene of Tula in the laboratory preparing the Rossic poison and some other stuff that are just gorgeous. So I really appreciate a show that takes time for the aesthetics beyond just visual storytelling, but actually making something that's visually beautiful for itself. That then lends to the story. So I really appreciate that. They're dealing with some great major themes as well: motherhood, emotional bonding, genetics, the sort of science fiction of this genetic memory of other memories. Obviously, we get some martyrdom and trolley problem, you know, related stuff. So that's all good. So I'm from a lore standpoint and a big story concept standpoint, I'm still satisfied. And you know, look, you can have an off episode in a season. I'm not gonna freak out at this stage. But yeah, some of it was a little bit, I was like, meh. Side notes, I did just do a rewatch of Dune 1 and Dune 2 over last weekend. And you can say what you want about Denis Villeneuve's plot choices. You know, some of his shippy test stuff, like how does he adapt complex storylines from page to screen? But man, that man knows how to pull emotion out of you with just a visual image and some background music. It just like, I just sat down and watched these movies and I just started emoting. I just started feeling. He's so good at that aspect. There was something that I thought was interesting too, is, you know, at the beginning of this series, we have that quote about, you know, victories, you know, and born in the, you know, in the light, but, you know, what you have to do in the darkness. And there's a line in there about the Atreides all dying in the dark in one of the movies. And I thought that was a nice little rhyming thing. And something else I just noticed, a very small point, with Jamis, when they're doing his funeral rites, they grease his eyes and his ears. And they do the same thing to Mother Superior Raquella when they're preparing her body for burial. They grease her eyes and ears.
With Jamis, I thought they were sealing the orifices with like a wax or something so that they can.
Right, and I didn't. That's good headcanon. I wasn't sure, but I just noticed that they did it both for Raquella and for Jamis. Whatever the reasons being, I thought it was an interesting.
Okay, no, I was saying I thought it was different with Raquella, but yeah, okay.
No, they put grease. Yeah. I mean, what purpose? Grease, I don't know, but they still put grease on her eyes and ears. So
no, I was saying with Jamis, I thought it wasn't grease. I thought it was like a wax or something to seal the orifices. Yeah. Anyway,
whatever the substance being. Yeah. So it was interesting. And then I started to reread. I've started to reread book 1 again, and some fun stuff in there. Whale fur gets mentioned, but not whale seed. And the Richeses, we've got some feedback about that, but they are canon. Chapter 6, they're mentioned right there. But we'll talk about that when we get into the episode. So before we get into our scene by scene, let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we will start to break down the episode. And we are back. Okay, final spoiler warning before we get into the episode. A couple of notes to mention. Lore versus plot. When there's a lore topic like the voice or other memories, we're going to discuss that and provide context for it. As to how, say, other memories and talking with your ancestors might affect, say, some of the OG books or XD books, we're not going to try to spoil plot. We're going to just try to steer away that, but we are going to unpack the lore. In terms of spoiling, though, we're going to talk freely about the Denis Villeneuve movies 1 and 2 and the first book of Frank Herbert, the book 1, Dune. And then anything else that's from the other books that happens on screen we'll be discussing. Anything from any of the prequel, sequel books that we think are show spoilers that would spoil the plot of this show, we're going to save that for the book spoiler section at the end. And we're also going to have some feedback from some folks who wrote in, and some of those spoiler topics that'll go all in at the very end as well. And before we get into the scene by scene, I just have to give a huge thank you to Nancy, 2 Kids, 2 Dogs on our Discord. She is coordinating our feedback. But for this week, I was chatting with her and I was like, I don't know when I'm going to, get the show outline done and stuff because of travel schedules. And she wrote her first episode recap, which we're going to be using to organize our discussion today. Nancy, thank you. You did an amazing job for your first time. It's really hard to do a show recap. It's a fine balance between getting enough detail off of screen, remembering some quotes, being able to sort of type while the show is playing without going too deep into a scene and sort of like just retelling the whole episode. And Nancy did a wonderful job. You are a godsend. Thank you so much. Also, big shout out to Brian, 8063, who's been helping us out on the Discord a lot and with some of the show guide material and back-end administration of the show guide. So I just really appreciate our community, and I really appreciate anyone who wants to step up and help and volunteer. Just thank you so much, Nancy. Really, really great. And regarding the outline, it's going to be a hybrid between thematic and timeline. And so Nancy has broken it up a little bit by themes and scenes. And so some things are going to be out of order, but it's going to allow us to follow through on some of the themes and talk about some of the plot lines without jumping back and forth between Wallach and Salusa Secundus. So starting off, we have Sister Nazir, who has become a Suk doctor and arrives on Wallach 9 for an autopsy. She explains that Reverend Mother Kasha died from a heat source that was internal. Reverend Mother Tula tells her that Kasha had a nightmare that terrified her and that she knew something was coming. Tula tells Nazir that she needs to answer to what happened to Kasha, but the exam is inconclusive. All right.
She needs answers, yeah.
Yeah. What do you got?
So I gotta point out first of all that Sister Nazir, the Suk Doctor, is played by Karima McAdams, Wheel of Time alumni in the house. She plays High Lady Surath. So she was in season 2. She was the head of the Shanchan, the witchy woman who had the sides of her head shaped. Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, deeper ties between the two properties. It's all good. The ship landing scene was and the Doctor walking out was all directly from the trailer. So I think we're getting close to having exhausted all of the trailer scenes. I think we have a couple more, but they really relied heavily on episodes 1 and 2 for a lot of stuff. What do you know about the diamond on the forehead of a Suk Doctor? Did you read the Suk the Suk school books?
I mean, do they have special Suk school books? I thought it was mixed in with other stuff.
I don't know. I haven't read the XD stuff, so.
Yeah. The Great Schools trilogy, it says the net titles of them imply it's about the sisters, the Mentats, and the Navigators. But to be honest, they talk about all of them, although they do focus on those 3. But yeah, just that it's like, as you have here, it's a sign of imperial conditioning. So basically, it doesn't just mean you're studying at the Suk school. It means that you have basically graduated, that you have undergone this imperial conditioning, which is supposed to make you unable to harm someone. It's basically taking the Hippocratic oath to the nth degree.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Is it's an Hippocratic oath that is like psychologically conditioned into you. When I was reading book 1, they talk about it being a sign of imperial conditioning. So I don't think the diamond has anything specifically to do with the Suk school, unless that's some extended universe lore.
No. But I mean, where do you get the imperial conditioning? At the Suk school. At the
Suk school, right.
So I would say it's not like a sign of being a student there. It's more of a sign of being a graduate there.
I like that. Okay.
But they also always have long hair that they wear in a silver ring. And
that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
You'll see it with Dr. Yue too in the original book movies.
Okay. So there was a weird shot at the beginning of this where they kind of linger on Kasha's foot, and I'm not sure, it was a little gruesome, and I'm not sure why they showed us that, other than just to indicate that it was her body and it was badly burned. But I didn't know if there was a clue embedded in there or not. I don't know if you picked up on the way that the scarring on her foot from the burns.
Well, I think, because I said in the last episode, I'm like, well, what if all of that feeling was inside her head? And this is a confirmation that nope, very much burned. Everybody sees it. Super burned.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that goes into this question of this meridian network, because she says there's no evidence of an accelerant. The heat source was an internal and acute imbalance of her meridian network, which in this universe, I'm not sure what they're employing that term to mean necessarily, but in our modern context, the meridian network is a system of energy lines in the body that come from traditional Chinese medicine. At least that's how we know it. And it's an understanding of how ki energy or sort of
Qi.
Psychic spiritual energy can flow through the body.
Yeah, qi.
Yeah.
It's something like, Western scientists will be like, that's a pseudoscience, but, there are studies where people are trying to say like, well, how do we see the effects that are attributed to the meridian network, and that there might actually be some basis. So.
Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about prana bindu and nervature training later, but this is certainly an indication of the way that the Sisterhood trains people to have an awareness at a cellular level. So if there's something that could affect the meridian network by creating this imbalance, that's not only a clue to the central mystery, but also builds some lore for the Sisterhood in terms of how they train and do stuff. Speaking of lore, something that I thought would be interesting to point out is that you can cross discipline in this universe. So you could be a Bene Gesserit sister and a Mentat. You could be a Sook doctor and a sister of the Sisterhood. Now, it's not talked about specifically in the books, but I doubt that trying to triple up on your specializations would be very feasible, because you have to dedicate so much to just one training, but you can double up on two, and we certainly see that.
I mean, I guess in the original book, Paul Atreides kind of does that. He kind of learns a little bit from not the Sook school, but from most of the other schools. But then it's because all of his tutors are in one place. He doesn't have to study in different schools and different planets. And
that's a good point. Yeah, because he's a noble trained to lead. He's learning to be a swords master from two of the greatest, the Imperium's greatest single combat fighters, Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho. And specifically, he's being pre-trained as a Mentat as a young man. And then all the while, his mother is teaching him Bene Gesserit skills. And so he is a multiple of things, which makes him the Kwisatz Haderach. Next scene, news of Kasha's death has spread through the Sisterhood and is the topic of conversation for several Alkalites gathered in the library. They wonder how something like this could have happened. Sister Theodosa warns the others to keep up their guard. She believes that a truthsayer of the Imperial Court killed just before the wedding is no coincidence. It must be an assassination. Dun, dun, dun.
I mean, yeah.
So I thought what was a little interesting here is that we have four sisters, Emmeline, Jen, Theodosa, and Lila. And that's kind of a mirror to Valia, Tula, Kasha, and we have yet to meet in the modern or in the concurrent storyline, Francesca. So they're sort of giving us the original four sisters who led the Sisterhood on the path that Valia wanted, versus these young four acolytes who are learning now.
Yeah, and who may not have the same goals, basically, or at least we see that Jen and Emmeline are opposed this episode.
Right. Yeah, a little bit of divergence, where Emmeline says the founding sisters were willing to die for Raquel's, to follow in her footsteps. And just a reminder, if you need a refresh on who's who, you can go to our show guide. That's what it is. We have pictures there, links to the actors, IMDb pages, and then just short little bios to help refresh memory. So it's a really great resource, especially while you're watching the episode. All right, so on to news that Pruitt has met a similar fate. Valia realizes that this must be the burning truth that Mother Superior Raquel spoke of as she lay dying. She immediately makes plans to leave for Salusa Secundus. With Kasha gone, someone has to fill the void and protect our plans. So she also wants to secure the princess, so she invites Theodosa to accompany her with instructions to make yourself her confidant. I thought that this was interesting here. The language specifically, we need to secure the princess, right? The princess isn't a person. Hey, this is an important, person for us. She's more of an asset than she is a person.
I mean, I guess I treat everyone like that, including their own sisters.
True, which is what I think Jen later sort of disagrees with, is that you're being treated as a tool rather than as a person, right? For the greater good of the sisterhood. And then I didn't quite pick this up on my first viewing, but Valia is basically assigning herself to be the truthsayer of the Emperor. Like, she doesn't even say I'm your replacement, but she's just kind of stepping in that way.
Right. I mean, probably not permanently, but I guess it makes sense that she's like, I want to talk to this guy who it looks like killed my sister.
Right.
Yeah.
They do some more foreshadowing of the keycard access to the genetic library. We see that sort of being handed off specifically. And we also get a name drop of Francesca, so another little foreshadowing of stuff that's coming up. There was a little scene when Valia is talking to Theodosa where Theodosa says, you're aware of my circumstances, ? And I was wondering if you had any thoughts as to what Theodosia's circumstances are, like, because they just drop that line and there's no other additional information.
Well, I mean, my first thought when Theodosia said that was she's pregnant.
Uh-huh.
That's still, I guess, is my leading theory. I don't know if there could be an illness or my circumstances, or maybe some connection with the royal family or whatever that she's being called into.
Right.
But yeah, my first thought was pregnant.
Right. Which I think would be interesting to be a sister in training and then for them to do that. But that in some ways might make sense because they're trying to make sure that they have genetic lineages for everyone before they might enter into dangerous situations. You know, you want to get those genetic memories embedded in particular lines.
Yeah, but okay. Well, we're going to talk about that later.
Yes.
Because
I think you had a thought about that. Yeah. All right. Hard choices. With Valia departing while it's 9, Tula learns that her sister doesn't think she's up to the task of maintaining the sisterhood in her absence. Valia explains that hard choices are needed involving Lila, one of the sisters who Tula helped raise. She needs to connect with her ancestors, said Valia. She is the one who can give us the answers we need. We must understand how this prophecy will unfold. Tula does not believe Lila is strong enough, and that taking this course of action may make their secrets vulnerable. But Valia counters that this is a risk they must take. Thoughts about this sort of? We got some dramatic tension ramping up here. What do you think about where Tula and Valia are falling down on the either side of this question?
Well, I mean, I think it's rich for Valia to say that. I mean, just because Valia in the great school books, Valia, she puts off doing this agony because she doesn't want to die. And to be fair, at that point, the only person who had survived it was Raquella, and everyone else who had tried and died. And so
they tried and died.
And then Dorothea was the first to survive after Raquella, the spirits. But yeah, so now, of course, so Valia is. I don't think anyone ever mistook her for like a nice person, but this is just very hypocritical of her.
It's true. Yeah. And they use the word. We get the name drop of agony, right? It's not the spice agony, but it's just the agony at this stage because they're not using spice yet for that function. And that's a good lore corner to touch base with real quick. And we've mentioned this before, that sisters are able to have control over the cell, they can manage the cellular aspects of their bodies, and they can change how things are metabolized in their system. In the first Dune movie, when Jessica drinks the water of life, Paul mentions this. He says, my mother was trained to be able to do this, to alter the chemical nature of the poison. And so the agony, this is this crisis point. This is one of the things about the sisterhood, that crisis is a tool. Frank Herbert uses this a lot in a couple of different functions, that under periods of tremendous stress are these inflection points where not only an individual can be transformed, but the species itself can go through transformation. And what I think the sisters are trying to do over time is to guard or to guide humanity through all these trials and tribulations. And one of the things that they really try to instill in themselves is this idea that emotions cloud judgment. So you're going to keep, things like who's your mother and individual attachments, which could potentially compromise you from pulling the lever in the trolley test versus the individual versus the many kind of thing. And so not only is the agony and this crisis moment of an individual being able to reach down into their body, and you can only do that knowing that there's no safety net here, that there is no antidote to this poison. You have to push yourself beyond what you think your limits are. So that's part of what the agony is. But at the same time, you don't want to be clouded by emotions and personal feelings when you have the species of the survival at stake, which is something that gets the Sisterhood in trouble later as well. But that's like in the back half of the 6 books.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to point out that that they're using now, it's not the water of life like we see them using in the original book movies, which is based on the spice. But this is what they call the Rossack poison. And basically it's experiments from, they took what worked with Mother Rakella and experimented with it and tried to find a form that didn't kill other people. And this was what they came up with. So this is, with poisonous plants from Rossack.
And you had mentioned this, I think, in the last podcast, that the sisters were on Rossack before they came to Wallach 9, and Sister Rakella accidentally got poisoned, and or was it wasn't accidental? I don't think it was intentional.
No, I think she was poisoned, but then she overcame it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they ended up fleeing the planet because the plague got real bad. And, yeah, and they Wallach 9 is like the nicer planets, even though it sounds, I'm sad we don't see Rossack because it sounds beautiful, like purple silvery jungle,
interesting,
but deadly.
All right, grief and blame on Seleucia Secundus. Everyone likes to say Secundus. Duke Ferdinand Richese is insulted when the Carino family, but not the emperor, join his family to pay respects to his son Pruitt. The Duke makes threats about his fleet of fighters that were promised as part of the marriage agreement, but Empress Natalia subtly deflects his anger by blaming the boy's death on the illegal toy, saying everyone is in shock, but the risks of keeping thinking machines are well known. Finger wag, finger wag, finger wag. All right, Richese, canon. They are actually name dropped in the books.
Yes. And actually, so there's a deeper lore with this I dug into too. So as you said, they are at the beginning, that there's this quote. I copied over the whole quote from, you said book 1, chapter 6. They're mentioned once alongside a tribe of people called the Ixians, which will come up again. And so this is what at one point Duke Leto says. He says, few products escaped the comb touch, or chome, I guess is pronounced.
Yes,
anyway,
chome is usually.
Yeah, that's the biggest big business conglomerate.
Think OPEC. That's the direct translation from Frank Herbert's cultural historical context to future space, is a corporation that controls the collection and distribution of a critical substance.
Right. So few products escape the chome touch: logs, donkeys, horses, cows, lumber, dung, sharks, whale fur, the most prosaic and the most exotic. Even our poor Pundi rice is from Caledon, which is the planet that the Atreides came from at that time. Anything the guild will transport: the art forms of Ekaz, the machines of Richese and its, but all fades before melange. A handful of spice will buy a home on Tupil. It cannot be manufactured. It must be mined on Arrakis. It is unique, and it has true geriatric properties.
So there's our Richese. So there's a couple of other things throughout the show that I've noticed where I can really tell that the showrunners and the writers have done their homework and are paying attention to the source material.
Yeah.
And so pulling up a name like Richese, it's really, I mean, I think in the extended universe, there are some other mentions, but at least in the original book, it's one passage. It's just like, it goes by. I completely forgot that it was mentioned.
But it's also, once I looked it up, it's in the appendices there's an entry in the terminology of the Imperium.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it says Richese, fourth planet because it's the name of their planet too. Fourth planet from Eridani A, classed with Ix as supreme in machine culture, noted for miniaturization. For a detailed study of how Richese and Ix escaped the more severe effects of the Butlerian Jihad, see The Last Jihad by Sumner and Kaupman, there's always all these in-universe novels. That's not a real book you can read, but as you mentioned, they do show up. Next, I'm going to read the Legends trilogy, which is the trilogy set before the Great Schools, which is set during the Butlerian Jihad.
Okay.
So I'm going to read that next, and apparently they talk about the Richezes in that as well.
Okay.
So sorry to listeners that I did not recognize them, because then I also found that there's a reference in the 1984 Lynch film.
Love that movie. Hot mess. Love that movie.
But a guild navigator mentions that he just visited Ix on the way to visit the Emperor, and he judged their machines to be better than the ones on Richeze. So that's the thing. Richeze is always second fiddle to Ix.
Interesting.
And the Dune Encyclopedia describes Richeze as deserted after the Butlerian Jihad and later resettled and controlled by Ixian colonists. So I guess this family must be Ixian colonists, or I don't know. The Dune Encyclopedia, even though Frank Herbert wrote the intro, even his own books contradict it. So I don't know what the canonicity of that is. But it's mentioned, in that Butlerian Jihad trilogy and later Great House prequel novels that are set right before the original series. And it's featured in an expansion of the classic Dune board game, which I did not know existed, but now I really want.
I feel pretty embarrassed now that you've pulled up all this research. I'm like, Richeze, what is this?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I missed it. So now we know. Now I will never forget the name Richeze.
we are Lorehounds. We lift up the surface, we dig around, and when we don't know something, we go learn about it. The classic Dune board game, I have never played it either. I know some people who have. It is an amazing, apparently a very cool, fun game. And to get the original on eBay, it's like several $100s now to actually find an original copy of it. So,
oh wow, that sucks.
Yeah, good fun stuff. I was really interested to see here Richeze. He's grieving, but he's really showing his true colors here. He's a real ass, right? He's lashing out. He's controlling. He's domineering. He's threatening, and during negotiations and things like that, you put on this better face, but you put somebody under strain, you put somebody under emotional duress, and you see different aspects of their character and their makeup, and he's really showing the controlling, domineering side of who he is, even to the point of keeping his children in separate planets, and I'm sure he's engineering all of his family in specific ways that he wants.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I also think every single person in that room was being an ass, and especially
I don't disagree with that.
Like, Haviko's already ready to throw Kasha under the bus. He just found out that she died.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, well, we'll talk about that in the next scene. But
yep.
I did wonder going in if there might be a secret alliance between Natalia and Desmond, because it seems like their goals are aligned. But I guess we saw that alliance form in this episode, because she definitely looked surprised if they found out Kasha was dead, because I thought she could be behind that. She was not a fan of Kasha.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. Yeah, we'll talk about Natalia's attitudes towards the Sisterhood. Where is the little toy?
I don't know.
Where is this thing? This is like
still not in my house.
Yeah, it is unaccounted for. Elysia does not have it in her possession. Therefore, but I thought it was really interesting too that Richeze is so willing to threaten the Empire. It's a dangerous game. Obviously, it plays out not well for him in the long run. But in his grief, he's willing to lash out at the Emperor. But the Emperor at this stage doesn't have the Sardaukar, so he's a little bit weak. So that's interesting. And, and I wanted to mention something too about the Rossic poison and the Agony thing. I was saying earlier that I'm predicting that is this the show where they're going to introduce the name Bene Gesserit? Is this the show that's going to give us Sardaukar? Is this the show that's going to give us, melange and the spice agony, the actual, spice agony, as opposed to the Rossic poison? Are we going to discover it? So these are all things that I think the show could easily grab onto and introduce us, into the Villeneuve verse storylines. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Last thing on this scene too. Love the look that Shannon gives Constantine. She's like, sorry, dude.
Yeah, at the end. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. This is where she's like, I fucking him. Sorry. But she's like, hey, you want to meet in a very public, open hut later in the gardens?
All right, moving on. The Emperor meets Desmond Hart, who tells him that the death of Pruitt was not a tragedy. You made your feelings regarding Pruitt and the wedding clear. As it dawns on the Emperor what happened, he pleads that he was just expressing a private concern. I did not tell you to kill that boy. But you wanted me to, says Hart. What I did for you, and I can do it again. So, confirmation, dun dun dun, that it was Desmond Hart specifically who did do the murder. Like, there's no question that he's the agent of death here.
Yeah.
So the question remains, though, what is he? How did he do this? And we have lots of speculation. Obviously, I think the showrunners are doing a good job in terms of goosing this along. All of the Dune heads are like, could it be this? Could it be that? We'll talk a little bit about it in the book spoiler section at the end. A lot of chatter on Blue Sky, a lot of chatter on our Discord. So, mystery, they're definitely laying out the tracks for the mystery. Let's just see how well they can unravel it for us. Do you have any personal theories, or are you betting any particular?
I mean, I honestly hope it's not any of the things it seems to be right now, because I don't want us to have this weird situation where things that are developed in like the sequel novels of the original series are suddenly happening 10,000 years earlier.
Right. That's also my exact concern.
Yeah. And then I also don't want it to be like magic, although I know that obviously in the show, it's a lot more magic than the hard science of the books, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a trending idea, and we'll talk about it at the end as well. I think they're laying some clues, but again, they could be misdirecting us quite easily. So we'll see. We're not sure yet with these showrunners how tricksy they're trying to be. I did want to point out this thing, and I mentioned it last episode. Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest? Which, is Havako saying, well, I was just expressing a private concern. In this case, I think he intentionally wasn't trying to hint, wink, wink, take care of the situation for me. But it's this whole idea that direction via indirection, this idea of plausible deniability. And this line is a true, it's represented as being a historical line attributed to Henry II of England, preceding the death of Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury in 1170, where he makes this, whether that's what was actually said or not. I'm not a historian, so it's a little bit outside of my pay grade, but the idea that a big politician will say something that will indicate a direction, but they have plausible deniability. They can avoid being guilty of saying, do this criminal act, do this immoral act, and leave it up to others. But there's a rich history around Henry II and about how all of this happened. And I think it really is an interesting touch point in human history of how do people in power exercise their power, either through direct statements or indirect statements, and having plausible deniability. And I think this is a historical antecedent for really understanding that concept. So, and again, I think we talked about this before. Havako's he's very weak, but Mark Strong is playing him brilliantly in a lot of ways.
He's playing him strong. No, sorry.
Yes. Mark Strong. All right. Carrying on. No, this is madness, says Havako, calling his guards to take Hart to the suspensor cells. Suspensor cells. Dun, dun, dun. And then he asks Swordmaster Kyrian Atreides to keep the holding of Hart secret. So Strong's really... Havako is really trying to keep secrets, and he even tells Valia later, keep this secret. So he's trying to compartmentalize information, which I think ultimately is going to be his downfall. Would you rather, Elysia, a sky cell from Game of Thrones, from the Eyrie, or a suspensor cell on Salusa Secundus?
Sky cell, no contest.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Open air, sunshine?
Well, yeah, and you get a nice view at least, but mostly like being pinned in place would just be very bad for me psychologically. At least in the sky cell, I can move around my little cell, and I'm not afraid of heights, so I like heights. So
that's the thing about the sky cell that terrified me was like waking up, and I think that's what happens to him is he's just waking up on the edge. That would terrify me. That would absolutely terrify me. So I might go suspensor cell just for the warmth and comfort of at least not having to worry about.
It's safer and warmer.
Yes, exactly. So this seems to be a show invention. I don't think we have sky cells mentioned. I could be wrong, and we could have a whole bunch of research. But again, it's just using the whole anti-grav technology, which are Holtzman's fields and extended lore stuff.
In the Great Schools trilogy, at one point they are like talking about prisoners, but they are like literally they are inside a ship. They're not on Seleucus Secundus, at least what I'm thinking of, but they are chained.
Okay. And we have some feedback from Jordan, who also pointed out some stuff about the Richese family, but also mentioned some Holtzman stuff, and we'll get to that when we get into the feedback. It doesn't seem like Desmond is very bothered by being arrested.
He's like, sure, okay. This won't last.
I wish somebody would just get him a new uniform. I'm tired of seeing this duster. Like he's walking around with his dusty old jacket.
It's his brand. It's his brand. He's like, look, I'm Arrakis man.
I love it. All right. Haviko's son, Constantine, has a little fling with Ferdinand's daughter, Shannon. Shannon says she didn't know her younger brother. Oh, you know what? I misattributed the look Shannon gives
that's
Constantine
later,
earlier. There's the later one when it turns out that she told her father. Anyway, Shannon says she didn't know her younger brother well or care much for him, but feels that how he died was especially cruel. I doubt my family will ever make peace with it. And then in discussing the source of power, Shannon explains that the Imperial Palace is not the source of power. Real power is whoever controls the desert planet. The great houses, the Spicing Guild, the Sisterhood. They all know that. What matters is who controls those flakes of orange dust. Unfortunately, the allusion to Arrakis causes Constantine to blurt out that they have a soldier in custody who is from Arrakis. All right. Sex scene, HBO, 9 p.m., prestige television. HBO just couldn't resist.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't, for me, it didn't really work. And also because like, what is this supposed to make me think about Constantine? I guess I'm supposed to think that he's kind of he really is the sort of airheaded playboy that he's been painted as so far.
Right.
So I'm not sure what that's supposed to contribute. It didn't make me... I didn't feel chemistry between the two of them, you know? Uh-huh. Like it felt like going through the motions. I'm like, oh, why am I watching this? Like, I don't know. I'm not usually a prude, but this just did not work for me.
Yeah, it was gratuitous. And as John, our other host, likes to mention, like if it advances character, fine. If it doesn't, and it's just for the sake of the scene, then that's a little problem. And I think
it was just like about ogling the actress, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was a funny comment by Rocky Zim on our Discord, one of our subscribers and frequent contributors, said he was watching the show and his wife walked in and asked him if he was watching a porno. It's like, well, you kind of are.
But he also said that he asks her the same about Bridgerton, which is also fair.
Which I love that as well. Very funny. And we've got some more feedback about the whole thing later on. So was that Samuda, that drug? Because it's certainly not melange.
No, it was definitely not melange. No, yeah.
I thought the little powder on the hand was a little kind of awkward CGI. And it's sort of the same like with smoking cigarettes. I don't know. I've been around the block a few times enough to know when somebody who's faking it, and it's like, you guys don't know how to bump. Like neither of these actors have ever done a bump off of somebody's back of their hand. So
I mean, good for them, but like, yeah. Exactly. Well, I think maybe if it is CGI, that could be a factor. Like, because they probably weren't having them actually snort something, and then so it looks fake. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the way that they were holding her hand. You can tell when somebody's picking up a prop that's not actually heavy, but it's like a foam thing. This happened in Rings of Power a couple of times where they have these big, great double axes, and they're like, oh, they're feather light. Because you got a fake picking up something heavy. Looked kind of weird. Anyway, it didn't take me out too badly. But I think this whole question of where power resides, that's an interesting topic of conversation. And it sort of made me think of that quote from Varys, that riddle from Varys from Game of Thrones, where power resides where men believes it resides. But this is different because in this case, there's a commodity that people can't do without. So we end up with a different equation, and there is an object that can be controlled, and that changes how power is how people arrange themselves to have access and to control that resource. And then that made me think a little bit of this idea that the Sisterhood, they've commodified truth and put themselves as power brokers of truth between the houses of the great houses, and in business dealings and political dealings. The Richeses, they're trading in arms and technology. So that's a power center that they can, based on a commodity. And then it made me think about the Carinos. They have the appearance of power, but they don't have a lot of leverage right now because they don't have something that's unique that they can control until they have the Sardaukar later, where they can actually threaten the existence of any other noble house quite effectively. So the Carinos at this point don't have a leverage on power at all.
Right. That's why they so desperately need Arrakis. Exactly.
And then they're having trouble keeping Arrakis, obviously, because the sisters are conspiring against them. But yeah, I just thought it was that this idea of well, if you don't have a commodity, then how do people organize power? Well, they believe power resides where men believe it does. So. All right. Moving on, in shock, Havako speaks with Natalia. He believes he will be blamed by the Richese family for ordering Pruitt's death because it was carried out by one of his own soldiers. He tells Natalia about Hart's supposed story. He claims to have been swallowed by a sandworm, the Shai Hulud. The worm gave him a gift, some kind of power. He's obviously insane. The Empress sees the situation with Hart differently. There are many who would turn their weapons against us, and this man pledges his in our defense. Let's not rush to execute our friends to please our enemies. I really like that line. There's some cringy writing later on, but that was a really nice line right there. What did you think of this scene?
Line. Yeah, I thought that it's a good line, and I agree with your note here that Natalia using the name Shai Hulud did throw me a little bit because, like, that's the name you would expect a Fremen to say that. Like Michaela saying that would make sense,
right?
But yeah, I wonder if this just how it goes along with Natalia's zealotry. If we don't really know much about where she comes from and what her background is, we just know she seems to be very Butlerian, anti-machines.
Right. And I think Haviko says to Desmond Hart when they're having the little chat out on his patio, he says, religion is the refuge of my wife, or something to the effect that it's my wife who's the religious one, I'm not. And so we could see. So are they doing something with Natalia? Are they connecting her to some of the more quasi-religious aspects of, and why would you know Shai Hulud? Like, yeah, it just doesn't make sense unless they're intentionally doing that, or they.
Right.
And
you point out that Natalia is very interested in what happened with Desmond there. It seems like maybe she does already have an interest in this culture, but of course, they don't know yet about certain connections between the spice and other things on. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but
skirt the line.
I mean, they're not going to find out. Yeah, that's something they find out in the original book series. So
right, yeah. So, but I do like that Natalia they're showing us that she's more of a power player, that she understands the levers of power and how to utilize power better than her husband does. And we get that early indication in episode 1 where she's like, yeah, dude, I brokered our wedding. So come on, man. Like, get with the program here. I'm not a trophy wife. I am a power of my own right. And I like to see that she's exercising that agency, even if I don't necessarily align with her particular goals. We'll see.
Right.
So, and I think it also just shows how much Haviko depended on Kasha.
Uh-huh.
Right. He was like, I didn't have this person, speaking. So Kasha's done a really good job of creating a dependency of Haviko to her. And maybe that's an interesting point is if Kasha's not there, then because he's kind of a weak man, he is being more swayed by Natalia. Whereas in episode 1, he was like, oh, well, we don't see eye to eye. We don't have the same memories because he had Kasha to rely, not the dependence that he had on Kasha, who was constantly steering him and sort of subtly manipulating him. With her out of the picture, now Natalia has maybe a greater input, a greater sway with what he's thinking.
Yeah.
All right. We've kind of talked about Desmond Hart enough already and about what the central mystery is. And, I like the idea of having a murder mystery at the center of the story, but I don't know. I'm nervous about how this is going. I'm hopeful, but nervous, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
So the Agony. Tula makes a hard choice to approach Lila to tell her that she's the great-great-granddaughter of Raquella, and that the Sisterhood needs her to unlock her genetic memory. Lila needs to attempt the Rossock poisoning process known as the Agony to connect with Raquella. As she lay dying, Raquella prophesied of an enemy and a reckoning that would destroy the Sisterhood. Tula explains, we believe that reckoning is here. We think she will know how to fight it, but she lets Lila know that it must be your choice. Thoughts?
I think I shared, I think that basically, that's what they said about the two wolves. I think that they said that the Harkonnen sisters are the two wolves because, Valya is basically, she's like, okay, let's throw Lila under the bus, let's force her to go through this dangerous, this dangerous transformation that she's not prepared for yet.
Uh-huh.
And, Tula, of course, hates that because she sees herself as Lila's mother in a way, but she still allows it. So does that make her any better?
Interesting. Yeah. The two wolves of the sisters. That's interesting. I thought it was interesting that they also mentioned that Raquella experienced a moment of prescience. So this ability to see into the future. And that is a nice little lore touch right there. A lot of the original books have a big subtext is prescience and the human being's desire to know the future as a way for us to navigate things. But I would say that Frank Herbert was arguing against prescience and saying that that's actually a dangerous thing because it's how we would genetically bottleneck ourselves as a species. And that there's tension that, that we need to be on the edge, on the forefront of experiencing things that we cannot predict. And then that's how we continue as a species to evolve and to change. And then, of course, we have the the prophecy of the Tiran Arafel, which is a tyrant-induced reckoning. And so they want Lila to get in touch with her other memories, and we'll get into a big conversation about that later. What did you think of the connection of Lila to Raquella? Did you buy that was a particular storyline?
Would you want me to get into the whole genetics thing? Because
I guess we might as well start on it now. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, so as soon as they said that, I was like, she must be Dorothea's granddaughter. In the books, now somebody correct me if I'm forgetting something, but I'm pretty sure there's no mention of Dorothea having children. Plus, the other issue is that the way it's presented in the books, again, so it could be different in the show, but is that basically you remember, or, you know, when you speak to your ancestors, you have their memories up until the moment the next generation is born, which makes sense in a way. And then there's later on, you know, maybe they find another way to unlock it. But again, I don't want things that are a big part of the original series to happen 10,000 years early. So somebody, I can't remember if it was on our Discord or Reddit or something, or Blue Sky, but somebody suggested maybe they posthumously took some eggs from Dorothea because they wanted Raquela's line to continue. And that would explain those things.
Okay.
So that's going to be my headcanon until it happens. But I do still have the question that, like, then why wouldn't Lila see her own mother there? Because it's not, you don't have to be dead to show up there. You're in the genetic memory, whether you're alive or dead.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think we can talk about it more later too, but this idea of like, well, I'm not trained enough, I'm not ready to do this yet. We see why you need training. There's not only the ability to metabolize the poison, but you need to be psychologically strong enough to withstand the onslaught of the other memories that are rushing at you. Never mind Dorothea herself, but just all these other memories coming at you. You need to be able to manage and negotiate that. And I think even Trula says at some point, you don't get to choose. You don't always choose who you get to talk to. Some voices are louder and stronger. And so that's a really important aspect of being prepared for the or the agony, and then unlocking your other memories. All right, Lila seeks advice from Sister Emmeline. Emmeline's family sacrificed itself during the Butlerian Jihad. Human life is sacred. That is why there is no greater honor than to give it. In death, we will be reunited with our foremothers. The dead aren't gone. Human life is sacred. I think this is also another big tension that gets set up in the books. And this idea that when we give over our control and our agency to forces to machines or to other things, then we are we're sort of disfiguring ourselves in some way. And so there's a strong religious, almost religious ferventry about the sacredness of human life. And you'll make no machine in the, what's the line? Make no machine not in the likeness. I think in the likeness of a human mind is the commandment. I have to remember.
Yes.
Anyway, and then there's a really strong theme of martyrdom here, which sort of gets us into the whole idea of sacrifice and the trolley problem, the sort of philosophical trolley problem thing. But I really liked in this scene too, where Emmeline moves the curtain back, which is a great metaphor for sort of drawing back the veil of ignorance and having this authentic, truthful moment.
But I was like, why can't the sister? It looked cool with the net curtain there. You know, it looks like a cozy little space. But I'm like, I hope she has also opaque curtains behind there, because come on, give a girl some privacy.
It's true. Emmeline mentions the word pulse atomics. Are you familiar with that term? That might be another XD thing that I'm not picking up.
Well,
on.
like I don't recall that from the grade schools. There are definitely atomics play a big role, and particularly the last book of the grade schools. But this is a story from the this would be from the Legends trilogy, which, like I said, I haven't read yet, but will soon. I don't know. It could be something like the ballistic ships they make, and it just makes sense. Like, okay, yeah, I understand what that is.
Sure. Right. So we'll see. And if you know, let us know. Write in dune@thelorehounds.com. All right. And they name drop from a lore standpoint here. They drop Reyna Butler and the Battle of Corin both get name dropped. We have on our show guide a glossary. Nancy, who is a true godsend, went through and she had like pages and pages and pages of notes. She did a serious deep dive and actually put together this massive glossary that's in our show guide. So if you're like, who's Reyna Butler? What's the Battle of Corin? what's the Butlerian Jihad? And you just need some quick notes without going out onto the big internet and searching where you can end up being spoiled. We have very, what's the word I want to say? Curated glossary definitions so that you can be refreshed on what that lore is without, being spoiled to the wider story.
Will that be linked in the show notes? The show
Yes,
guide?
There's a link in the show notes for that directly. So, all right. At the end of this scene, well, sort of on the forepart of the scene, we have a sort of a front back little scenes of Tula collecting some moss from beside the pool in the central area where a lot of things happen. It's sort of the eye motif and a lot of dramatic things happen in this area. Later, we know that she uses this to make the Rossack poison. And then at the end, we see Tula preparing the poison as she's confronted by Vila, another one of the sisters. And interesting, Tula says, it's my own experiment. So has she been experimenting with the Rossack poison in a different way? Is she modifying the poison in some way?
Well, so we'll talk about this prophecy at the end, but I do wonder because like I said, they have a lot of problems with the Rossack poison, with the killing people or giving people brain damage. So they have been, in general, they've all been kind of experimenting with it to try to find the right way to do it. And then I think maybe this is something we'll see in the show where they're like, oh, spice, that's the one. That's the the best.
It feels like they're heading that direction, doesn't it? Yeah. When Avila challenges Tula and says that, the lives of all the sisters hang in the balance here and whether we should give Lila, the agency to choose for herself, obviously it's the trolley problem thing. But then, of course, my mind went to the Wrath of Khan and with Kirk and Spock, the needs of the many that outweigh the few or the one. So I had a nice crossover moment there. And then I also thought about Jessica, who is another sister who chooses for herself. That changes Paul's the whole balance of a thing where she's like, I'm going to make this decision because I want to, not because the sisterhood is telling me to do so. So individual agency versus this collective knowledge, plan, wisdom thing that the sisters have going on.
But if they manage to control sisters for 10,000 years to create this lineage leading up to Jessica, wow.
Yeah. You can understand why Reverend Mother Mahayam might be a little bit pissed off at her student.
/ daughter.
Yes. Right. All right. Later in the episode, Jen and Lila speak in the library. Lila tries to explain what she can do, but Jen says that they're only using her. They don't care about you. Not like they care about the order as a whole. I was a little shocked at Jen's anti-sisterhood bent here, like that they're allowing her to,
I mean, I think they're establishing her indeed as a bit of a loose cannon. She was the same one in the last episode who told the story that Lila determined was part truth, part lie about killing the person who basically had her as a sex slave and then killing her parents for selling her. Yeah. We don't know how much of that is true, but this may have cultivated a personality of more like, you gotta take care of yourself because no one else is going to take care of you.
Right. Well, then later in the episode, Lila is told by Tula that her mother died giving birth to her. Lila believes that she would see her mother in the other memories, and that sort of uses that as a motivation to go ahead and go through with the agony. Tula says while she might see her mother, there are other options. I don't know if she was just giving Lila the sense that she could choose. Oh, don't worry. If you really don't want to do this, we'll figure something else out. If that's all part of the gaslighting.
She knew she was leading her there. Yeah.
Like,
and it turns out later that it does seem to be a lie about, like, because Dorothea says to her, like, oh, is that what, first of all, how does Dorothea know this? I don't know, but just, okay, stepping away from that. Apparently Dorothea implied that it was a lie.
Right. Well, and this goes to this whole theme of sisterhood above all, right? That I believe in our mission as a sisterhood, and that we're trying to guide the genetic future of our species. And I love how they're constantly weaving in the shadow of Raquella looming large over everything with this giant statue mural thing. It's beautiful. Like it's a beautiful piece of artwork, but it really does, it's like, oh, well, this is a nice remembrance. Actually, no, she's like pressing down on everything that's happening.
And then we'll find its carbon, what's it called?
Oh, she's been carbon frozen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and open it and Han Solo comes out now.
There was something else that bothered me a little bit in the scene, which is Tula gave Lila this most precious keepsake, which is maybe a whale's tooth.
It is a whale's tooth, and I know it's a whale's, because at first I was like, oh, it's a horn, and then when I watched the episode with audio description, they're like a whale's tooth. I'm like, that makes sense, because that's what the Harkonnens trade in, whales. Exactly. From the what was that? Lankavel is the planet that they're on. I just kind of felt it was a little bit of a transparent writer's plot, so that when Lila is going through the agony and she passes out, she drops it, and it's a big dramatic moment. And I was like, because otherwise, what is the keepsake for? I mean, I guess to show the mother-daughter bond. Yeah, exactly. Which I think is good, because I think we really do need to explore that idea of the sisterhood overall. Over familiar bonds. That's why they don't tell sisters who their parents are. So they don't form these individual attachments that then emotionally could cloud their judgment in a moment of crisis. What's the decision? What's the choice that's going to secure the future of the human species versus, I just want to live in the here and the now and have my emotional response to things. All right, let's take a quick break, and then on the other side, we will jump back to Solusa Secundus. And we're back. Picking up the storyline on Solusa Secundus, Truth and Lies. Valia and Theodosa arrive at the spaceport, and Valia gives Theodosa her mission: befriend the princess and don't be distracted or intimidated by the powerful people around you. I don't think there's much to this scene. It just seemed like some good world building going on here with the spaceport, and the name of the city escapes me at a moment. I know we have it somewhere in our notes here. But the spaceport actually reminded me of Zimia. Zimia, that's it, yeah. But the spaceport actually reminded me of, in the Sisterhood of Dune book, the part where Vorian Atreides, he has to go to a city where they do slave trading to rescue some people. Right. To me, like, what I pictured in my head during that is exactly what I see in the spaceport there, which would make sense, spaceport, but yeah. Right. And I think if you look, there are some other, if you have read some of the other stories and books, I think some of the way the city is laid out, and there's like sort of this central Colosseum-like thing, I think those are all part of a previous noble house's parliament thing. So there's probably some subtle world building in there. But I do like this idea that Valia is using their unannounced arrival to catch them off guard. So that the reactions, like, oh my God, what are you doing here? That is going to give her some insights as to what's going on and who is positioning themselves where in this. So, smart political maneuvering. Valia interrupts Ferdinand pressing Haviko to allow his security forces to interrogate the prisoner. Valia uses her truthsayer abilities to see that Haviko is lying to Ferdinand about anyone being anyone in custody. She also uses hand signals to message the Richese truthsayer to remove the Duke from the room. This is not over, threatens the Duke. Dun, dun, dun. So I was wondering, first of all, Haviko says to him at the beginning that he knows how it feels to lose a child. Now, I guess at first I was like, wait, did he have more kids that died? But I guess he means when they were kidnapped, that we learn about later in the episode. Right. But yeah, and then he's so mad at Constantine. He's like, just go back to playing your balistic. But like, come on, like right now, I'm like, yeah, Constantine, what are you bringing to the table other than that?
idiot bastard was a very harshly flung line. And then this is when Shannon gives him the sorry, not sorry shrug, which I think is hilarious. It was really well played by the actress. She was like, yeah, I used you twice for information and other reasons.
Right. Well, I mean, I could have told him that in the moment, especially when she was like, "Oh, here, take one more bump of the glowing space cocaine," and he's like, "Well, I won't be good for anything." She's like, "No, you'll be," and so it's implied she's saying you'll be good for sex. But I'm like, she means I'm getting information out of you, because as soon as he brought up during their sex scene that like, "Oh yeah, and there's a prisoner," she said, "Tell me more about this prisoner. I want all the information about this prisoner." Like, come on, Constantine, and come on.
Yeah, not very smart. Something I thought about too with Valia showing up. She's just wearing a simple hat and veil thing, whereas all of the truthsayers have these elaborate headdresses. And I remember you had mentioned before that part of that lore of that was having to do with the thinking machines and how to disguise themselves from the machines and as identifying them as human beings. But the other thing that it does is it's kind of weird and intimidating to have this big, tall headdress. But then the veil that the truthsayers wear really hides their faces really well. So you can't see emotion on their face. You can't see where their eyes are looking. It does a good job of obscuring them, which in contrast, Mother Superior shows up and you can totally see her face. And she's like, "I'm the Mother Superior." I'm in charge of all this. So, I can show my face and I'm not worried about what you see or think or I'm not giving away any secrets that you're going to be able to understand.
I noticed that you have in the notes, and I noticed this too, they've been showing, because people have been asking questions about like what's with the breathing and like the things they're doing with their hands when they're using the true sense. So yeah, that it's a shortcut that helps them get into a deeper meditative state so that they can, do this deep perception that there's actually behind the truth sense. And this is something I think people do versions of in real life. You use breathing exercises or a word of concentration like Om or something to help you get into a meditative state. But also the Aes Sedai we've talked about from the Wheel of Time are heavily influenced by the Bene Gesserit. And they have a thing where they use hand gestures in order to channel in their world.
Their magic.
And so then because they've learned it that way, if they lose their hands for some reason, they can no longer do the magic, quote unquote, that they used to do. Whereas others, if you don't learn with these tools, then you're not hampered by them if you lose your hands or something. So it's not like that they have to do that in order to get into it. It just helps them.
Kind of an on switch. To go into this deeper thing. All right, Haviko learns from Valia that Kasha has died and been burned the same way as Pruitt. Valia demands to interrogate the man being held. Haviko tries to lie, but the Empress intervenes and convinces him that Mother Superior will act as their personal truthsayer. So here we get into CSI Sisterhood. We've been getting a bunch of that already all along, but I don't know. I just had to. It tickled me to think of it that way. And then what is Haviko trying to do to lie to the Mother Superior? Like, dude, what the hell?
I laughed at that. I was like, that's really cute. That's really cute, buddy. Like, I don't think he probably couldn't even get away with lying to Kasha. And this is, the Mother Superior. The Mother Superior.
And then we mentioned this before. Natalia, she doesn't do a heel turn here, but especially not in the traditional sense, but just an attitudinal change. Earlier, she was very suspicious of the sisterhood, especially of the marriage. But in this moment, I think she is intensely curious about learning the truth about Hart, and she sees that interrogation by a truthsayer of any allegiance is going to help her understand who Desmond Hart is a little bit. So she is, as much as she's suspicious of the sisterhood, she is not afraid of using them when she sees an advantage to it.
Yeah, I mean, I do not trust her at all, but I do generally do not trust really zealous characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I think they're giving us hints that underlying she is a zealous person. Especially with that line she says to Richese, like if it weren't for our, the Butler family,
right, which you married into, by the way, Natalia.
Her family must have been key allies, I would guess, maybe.
Well, she said, I mean, if it's anything like the story that precedes it and based on what we've heard, I think that she brought a group of planets into the Carino Empire, but with the marriage. And so she brokered the marriage herself, she said.
When Princess Inez learns of Kasha's death, she starts to hyperventilate, but Valia talks her through regaining control mentally and physically. Inez says that she wants to still study to become a sister, and Valia and the Sisterhood want that too. She's introduced to Theodosa, and once they're alone, she insists that she be told exactly how Kasha died. Any thoughts about this particular scene?
No, I mean, I think everybody should take Valia's advice here about how to calm yourself when you're hyperventilating like that. Again, it comes all back to breath. And she uses a hand to just kind of, because she's like, step outside yourself. So she visualizes it by using her hands. So it's just a gesture to get her in the right mindset, but it works well in real life too.
Right. I love the sound effects here too, where we hear Inez's heartbeat and we hear it slowing down. And then as it slows down and sort of returns to baseline, there is the sound effects of the ocean and waves behind. And so it was sort of I felt very meditative myself watching this scene. But I think it really is a good scene to demonstrate what the Sisterhood is teaching, at least with this prana bindu and prana nervature teachings and learning to control your physiology. And we get that line in episode 1 where it's like, to know the truth, you have to first know yourself. You have to be in command of yourself to be able to do that. And so that really goes into their, not only their ability, their sort of fighting prowess, but their ability to do all of these things that make them seem to be among the wider populace, that they are supernatural in some way, when in fact they're not supernatural. They've just trained and focused. They've learned their lessons, and they use all the tools and tricks that humanity has discovered over the years, and then really concentrated them into a precise teaching curriculum. I love this. Some books date back even to the age of wood pulp.
Right.
I thought that was a fun little.
Well, hey, I got excited about seeing them reading books on paper in the 30 years ago flashbacks.
Exactly. All right. With the Emperor and the Empress watching, Valia interrogates Hart. He admits to the killing, saying he has nothing to hide, and adds, can you and your sisters say the same? Hart tells her he sees the blood trailing your every step. Shai Hulud took my eye and granted me with a gift to see what even you cannot. Hart attempts to open the Emperor's eyes about Kasha. I saw your truthsayer for what she was. She undermined your instincts and chipped away at your power until you had to grovel before lesser men. While voices whisper in her head, Valia tells Haviko that Hart speaks the truth as he believes it, but she claims is a lie. The Empress brushes off Valia's warning, and Haviko asks for proof that Hart could have attacked Kasha on another planet. He won't turn the Imperium into a circus of fear and rumor. Travis Fimmel and his crazy eyes. He's very good at this crazy eye acting style.
Right. Yeah, so Haviko, as I said earlier, he got over Kasha dying really quickly, and he's immediately protecting Hart. So that just goes to show, I just think Haviko is the smarmiest character.
Being well played, yeah, but absolutely you're right.
Yeah. But also I wanted to point out that they mentioned here that Hart is from a planet called Balut.
Right.
And she says harsh word for a child. And an interesting thing about Balut is that it was ravaged by slavers from the planet of the Bene Tleilax. How do you say?
Tleilax. Yes.
Readers of the original later book series know who I'm talking about. But this the fact that he's tied to a planet that was known to be ravaged by this group of people ties into a popular theory about him that we'll discuss later.
Right, exactly. We get the mention of Shai Hulud again, so twice they've mentioned that the name of the worm, or a religious name for the worm. And I like this conversation around personal truth versus objective truth. Like, is there an objective truth? And what Hart believes is true versus what others may say. I think that's again, the show is where some of the dialogue or some of the plot lines, people might question a little bit. Again, they really are putting their hands around some really great, deeper thoughts, and I like them playing with this idea of the question of what is truth and whose truth is objectively or true. I guess is the truth true? All right, and then of course we get the setup for this central mystery, like how do we have two deaths occurring at the same time across the universe?
Mm-hmm.
And Haviko gives the command, like, well, until you give me proof, whatever. But oh, by the way, you can't investigate the truth. Right. You can't tell anybody about this. So good luck trying to. It's sort of a catch-22 situation. It's eerily reminiscent of some concurrent things. But that aside, in a conversation with the Richese truthsayer, Valia says they cannot lose the fleet and worries Carino is slipping through our grasp, and he needs to be reminded of their value. Valia doesn't seem very happy with the other sister. I don't think we ever got her name, the other truthsayer's name.
The other sister is Vera because it means truth.
Oh, that's right. I remember you saying that, which is a cute little nod. And then, of course, we get this thing that Valia has to meet another contact in Zemia, which is where we get the name of the spaceport, sort of the main city of the capital. We have a little bit of lore here as well. A cone of silence, the thing that they're standing in. We see this in the first Dune movie, the Villeneuve Dune movie. And the idea is, and I believe this is from the original 6 books, that there is a vibration pattern that is set up in this conical shape that is 180 degrees, 180 frequencies opposite to the sounds of voices. So it's just sort of a noise canceling thing. So I don't know. It was interesting that they brought it in, but I'm not sure how much it added. Maybe just to the lore, to the air of secrecy and political intrigue.
Right.
All right. Next, we see Kyrian Atreides mapping the palace, and he hides in the wall, the tool he's using when he hears voices getting close. He then travels to Zemia, where he meets with Michaela, who is giving Horus, a rebel, the proceeds from the Arrakis Hall. In jest, Horus calls out Kyrian for being a direct descendant of a war hero, Vorian Atreides. Kyrian shows the virtual map that he's made of the palace, including the throne room. In addition to the map, not yet completed, the rebels' plans include killing the Emperor to announce their rebellion. Kyrian's loyalty is questioned, but he assures them of his loyalties and his belief in the rebellion because the great houses are hoarding spice, forcing the people to turn to violence to get what they need to survive. All right, what do you think about Kyrian here? He turns out to be
I think
spy.
Kyrian. Well, so we saw him like photographing, basically doing a 3D mapping of the palace, and then we see that. So he's like playing all sides at the moment, it seems. So that explains why he has entered this household as a sword master. But then, so he's with the rebels. That seems righteous because he doesn't want the great houses to hoard spice because that hurts everybody else. So got to be on his side for that. But then, of course, he's also he is getting closer to the princess, and he doesn't want anything to happen to her. So now he's got to be shaken in where his loyalties lie at the moment.
Right. This is kind of where the episode went off the rails a little bit for me. There's a lot of exposition and a few tropes that I didn't particularly care for, but that's fine. I do have to call out the actor who plays Horus. He's the actor. If you watch the most recent Noah Hawley Fargo season, this is Old Munch, who's the same actor. So really enjoyed seeing him on screen. Vorian Atreides, I think we mentioned him before, but do you want to do a little lore brief on that?
Yeah, so Vorian Atreides, he's in a lot of ways the founder of House Atreides, as we know it. I think we're maybe not talking about why, but let's just say he lived for a very long time. So I mentioned he established families on 2 different planets. One, his first family was on Caladan, which is the water planet where Paul Atreides is much later born. And then he had a second family after his first family kind of aged out, on this bucolic hunting planet where he liked to hunt there, but just like a very chill planet called Kepler. And I'm wondering which one this Kieran Atreides is from. I'm guessing based on personality and like just kind of rough around the edgesness that he's from Kepler. But yeah, I would like. But the important thing about Vorian Atreides is he, Valia particularly, she hates the Atreides. But she hates Vorian most of all because that is who she blames for her family being exiled.
Right. And we get a little bit of that in the prologue of episode 1.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but she blames Vorian Atreides specifically.
Right. And then we also get a name drop of the Landsraad, which you said is a Dutch word?
Yeah, it just means basically council of countries. Land is country, Raad is council.
Right. And Frank was really enjoyed finding real words out in our primary world and then incorporating those and folding those into his lore and world building.
Oh yeah, he has a few like Dutch names in there. It seems like he has pet cultures he pulls from, like obviously Finnish, Greek,
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Valia travels to Zemia to meet with the Fremen bartender Michaela, who we learn is a undercover sister with the rebellion, with the goal of keeping the Imperium power in check. Valia wants the names of the rebels involved in the Arrakis raids to assuage the Emperor's fear and allow the princess to leave for training with the Sisterhood. Michaela provides Valia with Kieran's name. This is also where the episode got a little muddled for me. This thing, we empower the great houses to maintain order and allow rebellion to keep that power in check. That's exposition for us. They're like just point blank telling us the thing. It's not something that I would expect Michaela to say to Valia. They understand this. They know this. And so it really kind of rubbed me the wrong way in this side. But anyway, what did you think of this scene?
I see what you're saying there. I did like the line, the rebel attack on the harvester was a beautiful manipulation, because that was a moment where I'm like, oh, really? Oh, yeah, of course. Oh,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah.
That's more like okay, so you're telling us that you were involved in it, and that tells us so much about the Sisterhood and how they operate and the whole situation with that the Emperor wants information about. So now it also tells us a lot about Valia, that she's like, well, now I want all the names. And Michaela's like, oh, you want to burn the whole thing. And Michaela gives Kieran's name first, which I was surprised, because I thought in the first episode, maybe she had a crush on Kieran because she was kind of like watching him with Inez and stuff.
We all have a crush on him, but.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that aside. But yeah, it's interesting that that's the name she gave up first. And then I also understand now she was watching him for Valia, kind of,
Right.
She was watching him not necessarily out of romantic interest, but just out of like political interest. And I loved when Valia, she asks, Valia's like, oh, in Atreides? And she's like, does that pose an issue? I'm like, no, I think inside she's like, oh, no, it's fine. But inside she's like, da, 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 da.
Exactly.
But I don't
Another
think
chance to burn the Atreides a little bit.
But I mean, I think he's probably going to stick around. And what I think is, first of all, since Michaela's been watching Kieran, she'll tell Valia he's close to the princess. And maybe Theodosia isn't able to get as close as they would like. So he's the card they might have to play.
Okay.
But also, by the end of the episode, given, what what Desmond says about, you've lost your privileges at the palace, she's probably back on wanting to weaken the Emperor again.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So she doesn't want to take out, even though he's an Atreides, he might be a useful tool to her.
Yeah, right. And I think that's an interesting point of dramatic tension is, can Valia resist her own urges to restore her family's good name, quote unquote, and do some damage to the Atreides versus their bigger mission? Yeah, agreed. All right, Princess Inez is working out her frustrations with some training. Kyrian joins her. She confides in him a story about when she was young and how she was a pawn in a political cover-up. We're all just pieces on the board to be placed in the pursuit of power and spice. He makes a move to kiss her, but she says it won't work as she's no longer. I'm confused about this, but Nancy has a note here that she's no longer going to Wallach 9. Kyrian agrees that it would be bad for both of us. What did you think of this scene? This is also, again, where it got a little cringy for me. But
well, I have to say, none of the chemistry between the alleged sexy time peoples is really hitting for me.
Sexy time peoples, I like that.
I'm just not feeling the chemistry. So I think it could have been they're both attractive people. I don't know why I'm not feeling it. And I think I would have been way more into the kiss if I were feeling that.
Right.
So I'm more interested in their relationship from a political perspective, to be honest.
I felt the line here too, we're all just pieces on the board to be placed in the pursuit of power and spice. That was just a little clunky again for me. It was just a little too expository and plain. So, but I did find it interesting that Inez was, taken hostage in a power play. And because that goes back to something that Kasha said to her when me and my sisters found you. Right. So maybe the Sisterhood was involved in rescuing her or brokering the return of the daughter to, of Inez to her family.
Yeah. Yeah. I found the whole broken chain thing a very interesting tease. I was thinking, so if she was the age of the 9-year-old boy when it happened, then this all happened after that Imperial Court story, which is the last written thing. So it's all new. This broken chain, but I'm wondering if this broken chain rebellion will in any way play into why Kieran is with the rebels.
Okay.
Because maybe
he specifically uses
something.
That. What's that? Say that again?
Because he just learned something about, that she was involved, because he was really surprised to find out that she was kidnapped. True. Because her family kept it hidden because they didn't want to look weak. And I wonder if that's shaking some firmly held belief he has about the Koreanos being bad and this all being a good thing. And, who's the good guys?
Yeah, I like that angular thinking there. That's good. Yeah, he specifically says broken chain, and I tried to look up reference for it, but I didn't really find much.
No, it's a new invention because it's only less than 15 years ago, I guess. I don't know how old she's supposed to be.
Yeah, given her age, relative age and stuff, yeah. So, which I think you pointed out earlier, which you were spot on. It's nice for them to get away from the established lore, and then they can just play. They can invent and not feel like they've got to bend themselves too much. All right. The Empress goes to see Desmond Hart in the dispenser cell, asking if he's a prophet. He says he can do beautiful, terrible things. She tells Hart that Duke Richese is reclaiming his fleet and threatening to seize Arrakis. Hart offers to take care of Richese because I am still a soldier at your mercy and your command. Any thoughts here? This seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Let's dress Hart in something else.
Hopefully, we're going to see him in a new uniform in the next episode. So
he's like Matt from the Wheel of Time season 1 and 2. He has to wear the same stupid bathrobe.
Haviko confronts Ferdinand, who says he'll tear Carino from the throne. Desmond Hart enters and begins to burn Richese, who cries for mercy. Hart is made to stop, and Haviko tells Ferdinand to return home and bury his son and to say nothing of what has occurred. Let these tragic circumstances fade from history. Haviko's go-to play is, all right, keep this secret. Shut up about it. Don't say anything, and we'll just all move on. Like he uses that multiple times as a maneuver to deal with things, which I think is ultimately weak and ultimately going to be part of his individual downfall. Because we know that Carinos persist, but...
Completely agree.
Did you notice that when Hart stops burning him, quote unquote, and sort of there was like a little sound effect. It sounded like a little machine coming to a stop. And I didn't know if that was just background music, ambient, tonal music, or if that was supposed to be sort of quasi diegetic, saying like, and giving us a little clue that he's got something going on that has its own on off switch.
I think that that's a good thing to take note of, because I'm still very skeptical about them suddenly inventing magical powers in Dune.
Yeah, even though Jean, who's one of our co-hosts on Comics Versus and some of our other shows, he's all like, "Yay, go magic!" and we're all like, "No, boo, don't."
But not in Dune. It's not what Dune is.
Exactly, it'd be a little bit world breaking. So this is my one beef with this storyline a little bit. Hart has this incredible, quote unquote, magical power to burn people at will. What's stopping him from mounting a coup and taking over, doing stuff, with the emperor and the empress, and they have his loyalty and his promise that he's going to be a good boy and that he's a good soldier. But what controls do you have over him? None. He can at any moment turn and bite your hand.
They're blinded by their own arrogance for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, of course he loves us. Look at us. We're the emperors.
That's right. All right. Well, let's bring this scene by scene to a wrap up. The last couple of scenes. Tula begins the agony procedure on Lila. She warns Lila that the sisters will awaken wild and hungry and not to be swayed by them. When you find yourself in the darkness, seek the light. Carol Ann, go to the light. It will lead you back to the light, to us. You will emerge, Reverend Mother. A drop of the poison that has no antidote is placed in Lila's eye. Lila awakens amongst her foremothers who surround and grab at her. The foremother speaks through her. The key to the reckoning is the one who's born twice, once in blood and once in spice. Tula tries, very witchy. Tula tries to get more information. Lila believes the woman speaking through her is Raquella, but then learns that is Dorothea, who is seeking revenge for her death at the hands of Valia. Lila's last words before dying, are Harkonnen, you stole my future, now I'm taking your hope. So
I don't think she's dead.
Yeah, I don't think she's dead either. They don't tell us that, but I think she's gone into some sort of coma.
Yeah, yeah.
And they show all the other memories sort of burying her and sort of holding her down and occluding her personality. So I can't help but think of Poltergeist with all of this, because we just covered that for Spooktober. We watched all the Poltergeist movies. And so the whole thing of going to the light and all of these, in the other place and these spectral images, it was very much like the, the 2015 Poltergeist movie, that it gave me a lot of visual vibes of the same.
With the people on the other side, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What did you make of all of this stuff, lore and story-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was the horror movie effect. It was a mixed bag for me. Sometimes I thought it was really cool with like that kind of decrepit netting over their faces, but then others where it's just like overdone with like the swarming and stuff. I'm like, yeah, we get it. We see what you're doing there. I wondered about this whole, spice twice, born twice, one in blood, one in spice. Could it be referring to Desmond? It kind of seems to point to that way, because he's allegedly swallowed by sandworm. Or could it also be pointing to this water of life future, where they figure out where the spice is what they actually need to do for the agony? There needs to be the spice agony. But then also this path too short part, I was like, well, does that mean it's not the golden path? So it's like a false Kwisatz Haderach? And then that would seem to be pointing at Desmond again. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting, because Revenant full of scars, a weapon born of war on a path too short. And I can't, notwithstanding all of the other theories, I can't help but think that there's something that they're pointing to here about that as an early version of a Kwisatz Haderach who has some of these powers that the sisters are will ultimately seek. I just can't help but think about that. And that on a path too short line really triggers me to thinking like, oh, okay, what if this? Because a Revenant full of scars So Revenant, which is a great 2015 film, by the way, by Iñárritu. Inarritu, yeah. But that's a spirit or animated corpse that is believed to have been revived from death to haunt the living, right? So it's sort of it's not a zombie, it's something else. It's a person brought back from the dead. So a revenant full of scars. So we clearly see Hart with scars on his face. A weapon born of war. So we know Hart as a soldier, 12 tours, he's a dangerous guy. But then that also starts to indicate to me that he is other than human being, I shall say.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm really, they're doing a good job of muddying the waters for me. So I don't know what to think.
Yep. But I agree with your note here that they shouldn't let the other acolytes watch because it's bad publicity. But I guess in the name of transparency, yeah, they should. I guess that's probably one of the more moral things that they do.
Right. Yeah, hey, this is what you're in for. You might as well watch it now. And of course, they code the poison blue, which, gives us, linkages to the spice, the melange water of life. And I also agree about the horror aspect of it. It is a little B grade, especially with the Snorri cam. That's a camera that's mounted on your body, pointing at your face. So no matter where you turn, it's always looking at you. It was invented by a couple of Icelandic guys, I guess. And that technique has been around for quite a long time, but it wasn't until digital cameras where we really were able to go further with it. Because otherwise, trying to mount a film camera on on your body from your waist is really hard, not practical at all. A sister's true fear. Valia returns to the castle and is confronted by Desmond Hart in the corridor, in that little meeting room. She demands to speak with the Emperor, but's told that her services are no longer needed. Hart admits that he wants to wipe out the Sisterhood. Valia uses the voice to compel him to commit suicide. However, her power doesn't work on him, leaving her shocked. I always wondered what your greatest fear would be. Now I've seen it. It's not that no one will hear you, it's that they will hear you, but just not care, says Hart. Valia leaves the corridor and the episode ends. Thoughts on this big dramatic scene here at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is going to very much change Valia's plan. I think that this is why Kieran Atreides will live to swoon over the princess again.
Fair enough.
Reluctantly,
there were some whispering voices a couple of times. Tula has some whispering voices. Valia has some whispering voices. And I'm just wondering if they're doing that sound effect as a way to remind us that Reverend Mothers have access to their other voices and might be just walking around talking to them and stuff.
That's what I take it to mean. Yeah.
And something we didn't talk about with the other voices too, with Lila in the spite or in the agony, is that one of the things that happens when you start to get in touch with your genetic ancestors is they all want the spotlight. Like a lot of them want the spotlight. They want the spotlight of consciousness again. So they crowd and sort of assault the person. And so you have to be strong to sort of sort that and manage that. It takes a lot of internal willpower. And I can't remember, is it Children of Dune where Paul's sister, where we get a lot of insights into that? I think it's Children of Dune.
Even in the original Dune.
Yeah, but there's the stuff with Paul's sister, they go really deep into it.
Like, but she's born in the original Dune.
Oh, that's
even
right.
though she wasn't in the movies. But they show like while Jessica's pregnant with her, because you shouldn't get pregnant when you go through. But while Jessica's pregnant with her, she's already talking to her. And I haven't read Messiah in quite a while or Children, so I'm still in the first part of my reread of the first book, so I don't remember where specific things are. So I think that's it for the episode. All right, so we've running a bit long, as we are wont to do here on the Lorehounds. So we're going to break the feedback off into a separate episode. So you will be able to enjoy that as a standalone. So really quick, and then we'll also do the book spoiler stuff all in that podcast as well. Really quick, you have Silo in full production, and I think you've got a Wicked one-shot in the offing as well. Right. Right. So we're working on the scheduling for Wicked because it doesn't open in my country until December 4th. So we're going to, it'll be annoying. Shortly after that. Yeah. But also Marilyn was like, oh, great, because I need some time to be able to see it. And and maybe we had a couple other maybe interested parties in joining it. So
very good.
It'll be, so if anyone has seen it and has thoughts, please send it to lorehounds@thelorehounds.com and we'll include that in the episode.
Perfect. And then you've got Silo coverage coming up. We have what else?
In the thick of it.
Book stuff, or are you done with the book stuff, or are you just doing the spoiler cast stuff?
So in the Silo feed, it's the spoiler cast, and then also in December on the Woolshift Dust public and book club feeds, there is a Christmas specials. There's
fun.
We're doing a Christmas Carol, so there's going to be for subscribers. We're going to get into the book, and there's going to be an audio drama version of a story that predates the book that's very similar, about some goblins that kidnap a sexton and make him see the error of his ways. And then in the public feed, we are covering a bunch of A Christmas Carol adaptations into episodes.
Okay. Very fun. Sounds great. I love your audio drama work. So looking forward to it. It'll be nice. We also have we've got the Christmas rom-com stuff. I think Hot Frosty is getting some talked about, and our little secret.
Yeah, in the Lorehounds feed,
Yeah, so that'll be fun. I'm bracing myself to watch those. Those are not typically what I like, but John is pretty excited. And we're going to have our special guest.
Turn your brain off. Yeah,
exactly.
Cereal.
Anna Claus, who joined us last year to talk about some rom-com stuff, is coming back this year, so that'll be fun. We're going to definitely do some coverage of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. We'll probably do like a episode right after the initial drop and maybe a mid and post-season check-in, but that seems pretty excited. I know you're excited for that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's going to be led, it sounds like, by John and Maryland.
Yeah.
Maryland.
So look forward to that. Otherwise, I think we will get out of here. I have some 80s synth pop music ready to go. If you want to read our thank yous to our Discord and our Lore Master subscribers. Here we go.
Okay. Ooh, here we go.
I was feeling very inspired by the 84 movie, so I had to hit some 80s synth pop.
All right. Thank you to our Discord server boosters, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Duve71, Athena Agelea, Tina Q, Lestu, Nancy M, Ghost of Partition, and Richard W. And thank you most especially to our lore masters who make this possible. Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, Brian P, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Duve71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M, DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex B, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Sally V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, Kathy W, Lestu, Jeffrey B, Elysia U, Neil F, Ben B, Scott F, Stephen N, and always last, Adrienne.
Very nice. All right. So look for the feedback episode in your podcast feeds in a couple of days. And until then, we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by The Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.